Age of Wonders 4 is a game solidly moving into the future of some 4X titles, but staunchly holds on to a couple older conventions, like they're that one last rock on a cliffy precipice that they're afraid of falling into. What results is at times a glorious game, filled with the wonders that the name suggests and unique narrative elements that I personally feel are intrinsic to a lot of buyers buying into games about nations of frogmen who think fire's awesome versus fox people who are seafaring nations. However, Age of Wonders 4 has its issues. Comment on this damned video if you like it, subscribe if you don't. Age of Wonders 4 offers a huge amount of changes to the 4X formula, but let's start right at the starting. You load into the main title with the ability to make your own game or jump into multiplayer. I'm going to talk about your main game. There's two types, making a game completely or quick start. Quick Start is not really the real name for this because it throws you into a choice screen for factions over 15 of the weirdest fantasy creatures that you have ever seen. From frogmen to molemen, elves, dwarves, humans, orcs, and Age of Wonders versions of Skaven, which are just called fiendish rodents to protect against that IP. Each race has something very unique about them, and this is the first place that you notice how in-depth Age of Wonders 4 is. It's not just their name or looks, both of which are on the leaders, and you can adjust them and customize them until your heart's content. You can leap right into that customize button on any of the races that are already made and adjust everything from physical forms to a number of cosmetics. Age of Wonders 4's customization is really an onomatopoeia of game design. It's got these crystalline holographic versions of the races as you start applying the traits. Remove the traits of felines from being able to move quickly around the giant kitty litter box of the worlds known as deserts and maybe change it to sneaky. And let's remove the resolute tactic. This is basically something that makes them more resistant, and that's just boring. Instead, let's give them spider mounts. So now assassin cats riding on spider mounts that they most likely didn't eat from a porch window like a housefly, and you can scuttle around with them around the game world. That is just two things, and those two things, you could start with the same race, could be two completely different things, and result in two races that could exist in the same world and really look not at all alike nor act alike. And the fiction writes itself here. Speaking of cultures, you can also pick from options like feudal, high barbarian, industrious, dark, mystical, and that's the one I chose. Of course, you'll notice that it changes completely the look of the units themselves. And then you dive into the society traits. With the click of a button, the cat mystics riding magically leashed hell spiders can become ritual cannibals, but they can now heal from chewing down on corpses on the battlefield, or change that to prolific swarmers, which jets out litters of new kitty warriors with a social dogma that looks like go forth and multiply was taken as literally as possible. Now, you've seen this in other games, including titles from this publisher, in some ways like Stellaris. But it's the way the game visually shows all of these changes and how active it is that helps with the nested ideas. Speaking of nested, the nested menu system, that when you're choosing all this, only requires that you hit one button or hover over one entry to see all the information on any keyword. And that keeps you diving deeper and deeper and lets you instantly get an idea of what you may want to do or not want to do and what those switches will do to the entirety of the game. For the last two choices, maybe the biggest ones, you choose a magical tome. The magic tome is like the power tech tree for your forces, with spells both available in the overland map as well as in battle, like lighting an enemy on fire. My cats, straddling these spiders, go into battle only when they have to, most of the time using their spycraft to work other means. But when we go hard. And I could go with a fire, magic, or curse, or any other, but I chose to go with the Tome of Roots. This has the ability to unleash poison arrows that most likely are dipped in whatever the mounts secrete, as well as poison blades, locking enemies into vine prisons, and summoning thralls to battle along with me, which makes sense because most people aren't going to want to fight along a spider anyway. Then you pick the last thing. Now, this is the origin of your ruler. You might think that this would be the first that you chose, but as you look at the way the game builds out, this makes more sense to be the last. You can do Warrior Champion or Wizard King. I chose Wizard King. Then it's time to customize the look of everything, from the leader, the armors, arm length, scars, your army's colors, everything. And that's the quick start. If you make your own game, you do all the same stuff, but you also get to design your own world, islands, deserts, what magic's like. Do ancient kings rule the land consistently, remembering the good old days like bearded frat boys constantly getting in the way of your conquests? You can choose all of that as you begin. Once you jump into Age of Wonders 4 proper, you get a start and you get to look around what's important to you, and that's certainly the starting, which is the UI. To the right are your actions needed or taken, seeing data about deals between two rivals, or that you might have some armies needing jobs to do or get an upgraded city and have to decide what you want to do there. Around your unit, you can also see your spell book and choose which ones to ready, including those that can be used on the overland map as well as those that can be readied for battle. Top right is your minimap and your overland underworld buttons, which switches this. In Age of Wonders, you have a massive underworld, as well as the overworld, which can be used for exploration, sneaking between enemy lines and then coming up behind another king, and its own dangerous hidden relics and sorceries await. Along the top bar, your currencies and their values, like mana, gold, how many types of culture points that you're getting for what you're doing. These affinity or culture points, as they're called, unlock social abilities along different branches that I'll talk about in a bit. To the left are your buttons to bring up information you would expect on your armies, the city, money, and most importantly, arcane research. For each of the tomes that you choose, and you get to choose more as you level up, 3 spells are provided you can take, and they have the time needed shown below them. You can also reshuffle those 3 if you don't like them, and it will pick from 3 more that are available. This lets you not only identify what powers that you want to bring to your armies and leaders, but also if you want to change something, or something has changed in the game world that requires you to sort of reverse your different planning. Diving into the specific locations, like a city, by clicking on it, reads out like most games you're accustomed to, with facilities and unit building sections, each with nested spots telling you how much the item or army will cost, what will it bring to the table, as well as a section for the governing of that city, including putting hired leaders into spots to up the city's abilities. Now, each city can also be built out by annexing locations next to them after a certain number of turns when the city's population rises high enough to need to spread out. This can all be adjusted by affinities as well. Those are particular points that are aimed by the actions that you take, like chaotic ones or astral affinities, or different skills that you get, or just different locations that you find. And I will admit these affinities can be a little bit confusing. You got ones like order and nature, chaos, general, shadow, all these kind of skills, and this list is just straight up confusing when you go into it. It's like a world tree if that tree was a friggin' octopus made of stars. Identifying what each one does and when you can't buy it is a little bit off. At first it can be hard to figure out why you're getting specific ones as well, but later on it sort of makes that clear. No matter what, regardless, you're going to have to build out and field some armies at some point, both with and without leaders, though leaders add their own perks, their own inventories, or dead items that they've picked up from the battlefield. Armies can be as large as 6 main units, but whomever is within the area when you go to battle, there's a certain distance around you that can also have them join. It's a movement and complexity conceit that works well enough, I think, with the 6 spots, but it does feel a bit more contained than I would like. Luckily, switching in and out units from one army to the next, if they're near each other, is as easy as basically just telling that single unit to fly off and group up with the other group. Exploration garners new locations, unlocks new lands, and more importantly, will occasionally introduce you to other leaders. Each leader has their own exact stats like you do, and statistics and society ideals. Their army types with their own subtypes and their own traits. It does wonders to make Age of Wonders feel like you're encountering real fantasy races. And because of the sheer diversity, it adds to this rich narrative that's helped by the dialogue and diplomacy system. With you able to do deals you expect, like give gold or take lands or sign deals, but also it allows for you to just declare things like you're best friends with someone, even if they don't really like you that much. But hey, sometimes that's all you need to get a group talk going. Or making up grievances against other races so that you can go into battle against them. Or paying off grievances on things that you've done and that have accrued with your enemies. Let me explain just one example of this. I got along great with one lord and okay with another, but they were both pretty powerful and I couldn't face either one of them alone. So I made allegiances with one and told him, hey, you know what? You can travel through my lands with your armies. And when his army did just that to attack the other lord, I declared war on him, teamed up with the other lord, and then had those guys deep in my own lands, which actually sounds bad. But it's not if you also have the power to poison enemies and light them up with magic from the sky. We collected in a pincer kind of movement and destroyed them. I let the other lord's men into my land, and we poked holes until that original lord gave up and became my vessel. I always explore games like this in sort of a fishbone effect strategy kind of system. Meaning I usually take the main leader and main line across the land and meander with smaller groups just to explore. Strong forces towards the center, with expeditionary forces branching off from it. Endless treks to pull in from the map whatever resources that they find. What I liked about Age of Wonders 4 is you can try that, and a lot of times it works. But when it doesn't, due to diplomacy or someone going into the underworld and coming out behind you, it can really screw you up, especially if you've been doing it for a while. Now, in battles, you can do auto battle, choosing to let the game cast spells or not as well, or go in on your own. Auto battles seem to work pretty well. I never really had any issues. When it said it was risky, sometimes it was risky. When it said it wasn't, most of the time it wasn't. Battles that you go into are turned based, with bonuses for flanking, retreating units can happen, and so forth. I admit this is the one place also that Age of Wonders does not wow me. What you trade for in customization, you absolutely pay for in fidelity in the battles. Regardless of the enemies you face or the heroes you choose, the game doesn't look that detailed or highly focused like, let's say, even an older Warhammer game. That's because no matter how cool my guys looked, that battle area never looked that great. It looks lower budget than the rest of the locations, even when casting spells like fiery arrows or watching spiders ride in like the world's scariest infantry unit. You can utilize all of these and expect the spells on your characters or the abilities for you to use to look somewhat good, but the chaotic events, no matter how chaotic they were in battle, never grabbed me while it was happening. Though the results, of course, always grabbed me. Results like leveling up when you win and grabbing your hero and outfitting them with plundered items, or choosing new skills for them and watching them slowly morph into a character that you didn't really expect, into a champion that somehow is so resilient that they finished almost every mission, even the super risky ones, even at the cost of their own troopers in a fight. And these characters became sort of guys and girls that I knew. Or the amazing feeling of casting a spell on a warrior group and switching out their mounts to flying mounts and being able to see that. Great graphical representation in those outside moments. The customization, second to none. I loved it everywhere, but in the battle locations where I just didn't feel that the units had enough fidelity or animations to sell the difference, it's a sad situation. It's not one that breaks the game, but everything else I actually did really like. The UI can be busy, but movement across so many different lands is both magical and a bit confusing at first, and I was okay with that because that is the way I learn. Trying to see what annexing this land will give you or why you would care at all or just not grab everything is something that you will learn as you play. The design for the creatures in the worlds follow a lot of fantasy tropes, but with the sheer amount of customization, it quickly turns into something totally different. Even the lands you pass through, burnt out with lava or wet and verdant from being near a jungle, look pretty good, if low polygon. Performance-wise, Age of Wonders 4 is not amazing. From the 2080 to the 4090, there were times where streaming and data is going to cause a couple stutters. And yes, that's even on a system that has 64 gigs of RAM and NVMe storage. Now, most of the time it's smooth, but surprisingly, this is a game with no FPS sparing options for GPUs. No FSR, no Intel, no DLSS that I can see or speak of, which I hope is added because this has gone a long ways in a lot of titles, and now it's so casually expected to have something that not being there is noticeable. When it comes to the presentation, though, I love the look. Even with its caveats, the game just has this awesome fantasy feel to it. And while it can skew generic, the idea that every skill and item or steed you get changes things up is awesome. I threw Toadster the Jumpy King Frogman onto the back of a unicorn mount, and it left rainbows everywhere it ran. And I knew the devs were onto something when that happened. When it comes to the audio, though, some of this wonder doesn't translate well. First, the sounds in battle, they are not great. From movement to battle, the generic scratching battle sounds never feel entirely reflective of what you're doing with the spears or the swords, and sometimes spells inhabit a good deal of the same frequency. They're almost like not having enough of their own oomph, which is what they needed. The same can be said for things like movement sounds for troops in battle, which sounds a lot like someone dry brushing the edge of a deck, with very little in the way of accompanying sounds like armor rattling or people chanting or side and environmental spots. Musically, the game is somewhat the same. It's fantasy fare, but I gotta say, it is pretty generic. None of the tracks stuck out to me. None of them offended me either, as being if they were terrible or something. Horns and strings and one or two of the themes worked well, but they never really do anything other than cover the blanket of somewhat scratchy, low-sampled sounds when you're in battle. Voice. Sadly, what the game has is awesome, but it does not have a lot. Other than the voice actress, who does an incredible job explaining the thousands of nested elements you encounter as you create your kingdom, and all the rest of everything, it goes completely dry of any other true voices. It would have been awesome to have a leader or two have a full voice, more voices during battles, and more chatter, as inhabiting a land usually means hearing those people that inhabit it. Unfortunately, Age of Wonders 4 does not agree with that. But does the game agree with me? And that's where we come to fun factor, the dividing factor for so many different games. A game can look terrible and be awesome fun, or be just amazing looking and not be that great. That fun factor is what matters. There's so much to be said about the customization in this game, so I'm going to say it again. As you level up your leaders, you get to join a pantheon. I want to talk about this. This allows for you to see, meet, fight, and team up with your old leaders in future generated worlds, adding even more fiction, replayability, and skills. Honest to God, if you like the idea of a 4X game with a good deal of fiction that you can work together on your own and create to drive you forward to play it, Age of Wonders 4 is that. It's the first time the sense of exploration that I felt in a 4X game had actually fit into the creation system so easily. The coolest customization systems I think I've seen in a 4X game. It's not that it has completely different or completely more, it's how it's put together. The intriguing part is that Age of Wonders doesn't just throw random things around that you can customize. There's something about the game's races, ideas, ruler types, and world types that no matter what you do, it sort of makes sense. You can explain it. And there was a lot of gameplay testing, I bet, for some of these decisions. I also think that graphically, this is a game that a lot of the time when you see it, you're like, why am I getting some stutter here or there? Why is this not performant in the way it should be? And that is bothersome. It's certainly not something you want to see. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, wait for a deep, deep sale, or never touch it rating scale. Fun factor wins out for me in this game. I wish the game had better audio presentation for sure, and more of it when it comes to voice. Boy, do I wish that the up-close battles looked a bit better, because damn, everything else looks sweet when you consider it. But Age of Wonders 4 hits completely different from me than I expected when I got it. It's made from Triumph Studios, and Paradox Development Studio made Stellaris, and I get that, but there is a natural DNA between these two, at least when it comes to maybe just everybody playing other 4X games, but you can feel it. 4X games that are styled for their delivery and their understanding of smart reuse of ideas that work and then blossoming from that. The same way goes for this. The ability for you to jump in with a controller, and I would say mostly play the game. There were a couple times where I was a little flummoxed in how the controller went, but the support is there. Means it feels more like Crusader Kings or, of course, Stellaris on the console. And I love the idea that more people can play it if that's the way they want to do it. As you can tell just by me talking about this, and we're 20 minutes in, despite the issues with the game, I gotta say, if you're in for what I said, it is well worth getting. So anyway, that's it for me. This was an awesome review to do and just fired me up for some of the stuff that I think we can see in 2023, and thankfully have gone past in 2023 with some crap games, but this to me is not one of them. I hope you guys enjoy the videos. If you do, give it a thumbs up. Check out the Patreon. It's the only thing that saves the channel from just being absolutely cratered by the consistent demonetization. And when you go in there, every single one of you, $1, doesn't matter what it is, I try to give you guys something cool, whether it be Patreon podcasts that everybody can see at any level, or the Discord that's a little bit higher than that, or free merch or what have you. Guys, it helps the channel. You know what else helps? Commenting. It sounds stupid, but commenting absolutely helps every single video do better. If you don't want to help the channel, but you just like this video, please thumbs it up. And check out the podcast this Friday, the Best Gaming Podcast. We're going to be talking about a ton of games. There's so much cool stuff. Peace out, and gang, gang.